Hello everyone and welcome back. I'm going to do a quick podcast style video of the 2K 10th anniversary bundle sale that is currently happening on Steam. 2K has some really good games in their library and just give you a quick thumbs up, thumbs down and very quick reason why. So it's not going to be hugely helpful, but it will at least give you an indication as to what a game's strengths are, how I feel about them, and whether or not you might want to look a little bit more into it. So again, this shouldn't be taken as like the be-all and end-all of these games. This is just a very, very quick summary to give you a bit of information on some games that you might be interested in, or even better yet, some games that you might be interested in that you didn't know you were interested in. So starting off with a couple of ones that I've not played, unfortunately. Evolve, Angry Joe has a review up, Total Biscuit has a WTF is up. I've not played Evolve. It's a multiplayer-centric, asymmetric game. It's not something that I'm interested in playing, so I can't really comment on that. Same with Borderlands. The only Borderlands game I've played is the first one. I didn't really like it because of the multiplayer-centric element, and as such, I've not played any of the other Borderlands games, so I will be skipping over those. So, the first game on the list that I have played is Beyond Earth. I played this game obsessively when it came out, absolutely obsessively. And it is a reasonable game. The only problem is that it's also a very conservative game. If you have Civilization 5, then you've probably got most of what's in Beyond Earth. Beyond Earth feels like a good total conversion mod. It just doesn't seem to warrant the full asking price. But right now it's only £14.99, and that is actually pretty reasonable for what it is. It's also cross-platform. It's available on Mac and Linux as well, which is a nice touch. Quite a lot of 2K's library is, but by no means all of them. All in all, Beyond Earth is a reasonable foundation for a very, very good game, but it is only the foundation. If you want to be a savvy consumer and you don't mind waiting, I would say wait for the inevitable DLC packs and buy the Game of the Year edition. However, I do believe that a very large patch is incoming, which is designed to add a lot more content to the game. So, you know, that you can roll the dice on that and pick it up cheap now if you wanted. So that's up to you, unfortunately. That's a risk you'll have to assess. But the game, as it stands at the moment, isn't great, but it will get better. But you'll probably have to keep paying for it. BioShock Infinite at $4.99. Yeah, that's a pretty good value game. BioShock Infinite is a first-person shooter that actually kept me engaged right up until the very end. I actually completed it, which is more than can be said for most first-person shooters. I don't think the game is anywhere near as clever as it thinks it is, and I've noticed that a lot of people going back to the game now kind of don't regard it as highly as they did when they first played it. The game hasn't borne up to scrutiny very well, but that shouldn't put you off because it is still a good game. The mechanics are pretty solid, the gunplay is reasonable, the narrative is fairly strong, backside at times, and I think undeservedly so. On the whole, it's a pretty enjoyable game. For me, it wasn't anything special. I know a lot of people really enjoyed it, but for me it was just a competent FPS. And as a guy who doesn't normally play FPS, maybe that means something pretty significant. Maybe it doesn't mean a thing. Who knows? NBA 2K15. I know bugger all about basketball, and I have never played one of those games. Sid Meier's Starships is on my wish list, but right now there are more games that are more tempting to me. XCOM Enemy Unknown. I love the classic XCOM games, and I also love the reboot. If to my mind, the reboot took the core elements that made XCOM and built the game out of them with all of the extra stuff boiled off. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, there's not as much strategy involved, there's not as much management. Yeah, but let's face it, 90% of that stuff was busy work. Managing your own ammo reserves and so on, and actually having to order in the ammo, just did that really add to the game? Is that what you remember about XCOM, needing to purchase magazines and manufacture God knows what other stuff in the bases? That's not what I remember from XCOM. What I remember from XCOM is instruments that you got with your troops and the feeling of being up against something that was bigger and much more dangerous than you were, and you were only ever hanging on by your fingernails right up until the point when you weren't, and then you felt like a god because you had weathered the storm and now you were going to bring the hurricane. Yeah, I like XCOM. I think it's very faithful to the spirit of the original, even if the mechanics are, I hate to say simplified because that has negative connotations, but the mechanics are certainly leaner. But at its heart, it's still a very, very good game that rewards tactics and precision and punishes you for screw-ups. A game that actively punishes the player for screw-ups is a very rare thing these days, unfortunately, and it's good to know that it's still out there, and in a turn-based game nonetheless. So XCOM, if you're into strategy, then very much so, grab it. If you like the classic XCOM games and you've been put off by the screaming fanboys saying how bad XCOM is, and I'm sure they'll probably end up with one or two of them in the comments section, then, well, listen to what they've got to say and make a judgment call. But just know that I, at the very least, think that there's a really good game in there. The Bureau, XCOM Declassified. Read previous review, invert. The Bureau is shit. It is a terrible third-person cover shooter with cannibalized Mass Effect elements. It's terrible. It's terrible. At £3, no. It's still not worth it. The only reason to buy this game is if you wanted to put yourself through pain, misery, and suffering, or if you just wanted to see how badly they screwed this up. In fact, I would go so far as to say that the game is worth £3 as a demonstration of what happens when a game spends too long in development hell. It's been passed from teams to teams, it's been rewritten, rebooted, scrapped, restarted, assets recycled, goals changed, ideas shifted. This game has just been through the blender its entire development cycle, and it shows. It's so bad. Loads of half-finished ideas smushed together to try and make a product. It's terrible. So for £3, it's interesting. You're basically buying a ticket to an autopsy. If that sort of thing appeals to you, then you go right ahead, son. Spec Ops: The Line at $3.99. Yeah. This game is as clever as it thinks it is. It's not a very good game mechanically. It's just a very generic third-person cover-based shooter. There is an argument that the developers intentionally did that because what the game is looking at is our presentation of violence and how we glorify violence in some respects and then demonize it in others. Our perceptions of violence and how they're altered by video games that we're playing. There's a lot going on. There's a lot being analysed, and I don't want to spoil it because it does it in a huge range of very clever ways and quite unobtrusively. If an idiot played this game, they would just go, oh, it's just a military shooter. And yeah, it is just a military shooter, but the narrative is something very special that has something clever to say and clever ways to say it. For $3.99, well worth your time unless you don't like narrative-driven games, at which point you're probably not going to get much out of this. For $3.99, there's better stuff on this catalogue for you if you're just after games for mechanics. Darkness 2! I really, really do like this game. I am actually quite a big fan of this game. It is one of the few first-person shooters that I genuinely like, and probably the only first-person shooter released in recent years that I could say that I genuinely, unequivocally enjoyed. It's just fun. It's corny, it's stupid, it's gangsters with demons, and it plays to itself seriously, but it knows it's stupid. It's not afraid to just be a little bit over the top, a little bit silly, a little bit cliche, but never to the point where it's unwelcome. It's celebrating its own stupidity rather than just repeatedly falling over and face planting. Mechanically, there you've got the standard FPS stuff. You can also dual wield, mix and match weapons with between two-handed weapons and one-handed weapons. You have the darkness arms that you can use for melee attacks and to interact with the environment and throw things at your enemies, like you nail people to walls with pool cues and stuff like that. It's awesome. There's a lot of freedom in how you play and the tactics that you choose to use. The upgrade system is really good. There's loads of different things that it does. The game itself is nothing new, but it is old, reused mechanics executed very well by people who understand why these mechanics have endured and what makes them good. It's not an earth-breaking title. The narrative is really good. I like it, but it is a bit kitsch. There's a lot of press F to pay your respects sort of things in there, but it's clear that they cared. You know, they knew that they weren't going to deliver the greatest story ever told. They didn't set out to, but they set out to make something that at least had some emotional weight and at least got the player invested, and it achieves that brilliantly. So Darkness 2, $3.99, big thumbs up from me. Mafia 2. Oh, this is the epitome of a 5 out of 10 game. It does nothing well, it does nothing badly. It has a competent, well-told story. It has very good production values. It's just so forgettable and bland. And it's a shame because, like I say, it's not a bad game. It just doesn't have anything going for it. And for my money, that's not enough. If I'm handing over money, there's a lot of games out there. I don't need to settle for a 5 out of 10 game. If I shop around, I can find something better in the same price range, almost certainly, especially on Steam, the amount of stuff that's available. Granted, a lot of it is Drekin from Greenlight, but hey-ho, what can you do? Oh. That's probably going to piss a few people off, but I'm not a fan of the Greenlight system, but that's a discussion for another time. Anyway, my point is that Mafia 2 is $4.99, and if you really want a competent Grand Theft Auto clone with, a pretty nice and authentic feeling gangster vibe, then yeah, it's probably worth your money. But unless you're really after a gangster game, and I mean classical mobster, not... I'm too white to do any of this shit. You know what I mean, Italian mobster. Is that racist? I don't know. I don't care. I've had enough of this. Mafia 2 is a perfectly cromulent game. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's nothing particularly good with it. But if you really need some GTA-style stuff, go for it. Borderlands 2 and Borderlands pre-sequel and DLC passes. DLC passes is your poison, mate. You make a decision based on that. Personally, I wouldn't touch season passes with a barge pole, but that's your choice. Next up, Civilization 5. Okay, Civilization 5. Roundups is some of the games you can explain with a quick roundup, and Civilization 5 is one of them. Suffice to say, I think pretty much everyone who is interested in Civ 5 probably owns Civ 5. If you don't, then don't get the complete edition, which is $8.74. It's a little bit more expensive, but honestly, for the amount of extra content you are getting, it's a no-brainer. The basic core game of Civ 5 is, if I'm being frank, hollow and unsatisfying. The complete edition of the game is very good. It is much better. There is so much more to do. Civilization 5 is, as a base game, unsatisfying. So my recommendation to you would be, if you want to get Civ 5, spring for the complete edition. Beyond that, there's not really much I can say, because Civ 5, if you want to talk about it, you've got to talk about it in detail. So I would recommend hitting up someone else's reviews for that. Next up is a 2-pack of Sid Meier's Beyond Earth and Sid Meier's Starships. You can make your own value judgment on that one, I'm afraid. I've not played Starships, and you know my opinions on Beyond Earth. Civilization 4 Complete Pack. So this is the Civilization game. For £3.74, this is really good value if you don't already have them. If you like strategy games and Empire games and Grand Strategy and that sort of thing, Civ 4 should certainly be in your library. It is, in my opinion, one of the better Civ games, and very, very mod-friendly as well. Everyone's got their favourite Civ. Mine is probably 4. I think it's where the development hit the most balance of all of the different stuff in a Civ game. It's very hard to articulate, but there are recurring themes that run through the series, and Civ 4 just seemed to nail everything just about right for me. But that's personal preference. What you are actually getting in there is the base game, which again isn't really owning, but I would argue with Civ 4. Yeah, at this point, at £3.74, you can't even buy the base game anymore, so why are we even talking about this? Let's instead just have a quick chat about colonization, because that is quite interesting. You are basically trying to colonize the Americas in the golden age of sail. It's a micro Civ game. You're controlling a smaller number of towns and settlements. You're controlling a lot more individuals. It's basically using the game engine to create a very different game. Almost something like a frontier simulator rather than an empire builder, but using the same engine and very similar mechanics. It's a really good little experiment, and if you're a fan of the Civ games and you've not played it, I'd really do so because it's interesting. I don't know if I'd call it good, but for £3.74 alongside Civilization 4, it's a damn good deal. BioShock Infinite Season Pass bundle, again, your call on that one. I am not going to make any judgments on Season Passes. BioShock 2, never played it, do own it, have never fired it up. Reason being, BioShock I'm a big fan of. To me, it just felt like another FPS. The plasmids didn't seem to add that much that couldn't be added by weapons. When I played FPS games on PC, I was playing stuff like Doom, which had a huge arsenal of weapons that had a huge variety of effects and were very, very fun to play with. And it just felt like putting the plasmids in was like putting in some of the wackier guns from Doom, but dressing it up as something new. Maybe that's unfair. I was a much younger man back then, and I may have been overly harsh, but I've never felt any need to go back to BioShock, and I never felt the need to play BioShock 2, and the only reason I picked up BioShock Infinite was because nobody was shutting up about how brilliant it was. So take that for what it's worth, but bear in mind, FPS is not one of my genres. It is not something that I play often, and it's not something I usually enjoy. Next up, XCOM Enemy Within Expansion Pack. XCOM Enemy Within is a really, really good expansion on the XCOM Enemy Unknown experience, and it is an expansion. It does expand... keep repeating words. It does expand the game. It adds new content, it adds new classes, it adds new research paths, it adds new enemies, but it also changes the game as well. It's not just extra content, it actually messes around with the core mechanics a little bit. Now, as such, you can buy XCOM Enemy Unknown, play it through several times. I did. And then you can install XCOM Enemy Within and get a whole new experience. I'm just going to have a sip of water. Whole new experience is possibly hyperbolic, but it is a different experience. One of the chief problems with the base game is there's an optimal way to play and there's no reason to deviate from that. Balls that time out in the turn-based mode, and those collectibles can then be used to unlock the game's new stuff, which is meddling with your soldiers' genetics, and also creating giant stompy mech cyborgs. Now, the problem with the timeout is that you've got to get to them quickly, which encourages you to play suboptimally in a risk-reward sort of way. I would say, unless you're pretty sure that you're going to enjoy this sort of game, it's not worth getting the complete edition, which is listed in a couple of games' time. You might as well just get the original and then pick up the DLC pack a little bit further down the line, possibly next time it's on sale. But if you're pretty sure that you're going to like XCOM, then it's worth saving the money now and making that investment, because personally, I do feel it's worth owning that DLC. Combo deal, XCOM Enemy Unknown and the Bureau, XCOM Declassified. The only reason to get this bundle is if you don't own XCOM, you don't own the Bureau, obviously. And you want to play a really, really good game and also want to play a really, really bad game. I can't think of any reason why you would want to pick up this bundle other than to just embark on the bold experiment that is the Bureau. Yeah, nothing more to say on that one. I don't think that's a very good deal. Pacific Skies on Ace Patrol. I have not played those, so I can't comment. Pirates at £1.49. Everyone should buy Pirates. I really, really like Pirates. Pirates, Pirates, Pirates. It's brilliant. Even just saying the title brings me to joy and makes me want to flap my arms in the air. Pirates! But I should probably talk about it a little bit. Okay, so Pirates is very similar to your sort of classic exploration and trading game. Things like Elite, Mount and Blade, which I covered a little while back. It's basically about making your way in a game world. Now, there is a plot. You are trying to track down your family who've been kidnapped and on the way take revenge on the pirates that did it. And along the way, you will be a pirate yourself. The game has a lot of trading mechanics, there are a lot of upgrades, different types of ships that behave differently, different ammo types. You form relationships and build influence with the different colonial powers in the region, and you can leverage that. You gain reputation, you can court the various bells of the ball at the different locations and capitals. There's loads of stuff to do in this game. It's just a wonderful little sandbox. And at £1.49, honestly, I would say anyone should get this. It's not a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not saying like, oh my god, this is a fantastic game, everyone should get it. It's more of, at £1.49, this is a fantastic game for what it is. It's got problems, it's a little bit quirky in areas, the narrative possibly isn't as well developed as it could be, it's got a very cartoonish tone that might put some people off, but I would really encourage you to try and take the plunge on this one, because I think it's a really solid game. But as I'm going over these in light detail, perhaps it would be better if you checked out some other reviews as well, because, you know, this is just one opinion and not very well expressed. This is a very, very quick thumbs up, thumbs down. So, Railroads. Railroads is... I haven't played this in years. I first played it about 5 years ago, I think. And I think it's one of the very first titles I bought on Steam, actually. Anyway, I played this game compulsively. It's a railroad management, I don't want to say sim, but you can change the level of realism in game quite a bit. More of just a management game. You've got a collection of cities that have different resources they want and produce. You've got to link up the cities that produce the resources with the cities that want the resources. You've got to figure out optimal routes for your trains, factoring in things like speed and how much load they're hauling in order to make the most money. You can also establish supply chains and invest in industries within the city, which can then be further supplied by your railroads that enable you to make loads of money. You then use this money to buy out all of your competition's shares and ultimately become a monopoly and win the game. Does that sound tempting? It should, because it's compulsive. I don't know anything about trains. I don't care about trains. To me, a train is just a convenient means of how I get to work in the morning. It's a machine, nothing more. I don't get the mystique around them. I mean, don't get me wrong, I appreciate it, and I'm not having a bash at people that do, but I personally don't get it. But at the same time, I really love this game. And I think I loved it just because of the pure mechanical transparency of it. It's not trying to obfuscate what you do. You're doing baby's 1, 2, 3 economic game stuff. There's nothing special there. But it puts a really nice coat of paint over it. And the presentation is a little bit twee, but I like it. I think it's fun. I think it's a very enjoyable game to play. And that, for me, is key. It's not particularly complicated. It's not particularly challenging. But it is quite fun in a whimsical sort of way. I also think it's aimed at train people and train aficionados, because there are bucket loads of information about the unlocks in this game. Wiki levels of stuff. Last game on the list, Duke Nukem Forever. It is not a terrible game. It's a bad game, but it is not a terrible game. I think people were a bit unfair on it. But honestly, not by much. At £5, it might be worth picking it up just to say that you played Duke Nukem Forever. Or if you've been curious about the game and you want to see if it's actually that bad, then like the Bureau, now is probably the time to satisfy your curiosity. But honestly, just don't go in expecting a good game. For me, even at £5, this game is a hard sell. There's not much more I can say, because let's face it, it's already been said. Everyone's talked about Duke Nukem Forever. If you've not heard of it, then just whack it into Google. You'll find plenty of stuff out there. Suffice to say, the general reception is negative, and deservedly so. But anyways, that was a buyer's guide for the 2K 10th anniversary sale. My voice cracked a little bit on the way through, because this is actually the second take, because we had technical problems on the first one. Anyway, I hope this was useful to you, and if you do buy any games, I very much hope you enjoy them. But for now, I'm Evis T, signing off.